I'll call the meeting to order. Before we start, let me read the evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency evacuation, an alarm will sound. Everyone should exit the building by way of the nearest stairwell in a safe and effective manner. If the nearest stairwell is blocked by smoke, use the other stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Once you have reached the main floor, follow the exit signs to exit the building and quickly proceed away from the building. Please be mindful of others evacuating and of emergency vehicles. You have the minutes from last month's meeting in front of you. Any additions or corrections? Not. Do I have a motion to approve? And a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Hearings, preliminary plats, lots 1 to 28, Grace Crossing subdivision off of Nails Creek Road.
Are you ready? Okay. Item B1, like the chairman said, lots 1 through 28, Grace Crossing subdivision off Nails Creek Road by Artigue Construction, LLC. There are 28 lots. 12 of the lots have county road frontage, and 14 of the lots are served by 4 common driveway easements. The outstanding items to be completed are on page 4. I'm going to read them into the record, and then I'll take any questions you may have. Number 1, a pre-construction meeting prior to any additional on-site work. All required permits to staff. All instructions in this staff analysis for the construction of the common driveways, paving of entrance, construction of all utility and drainage improvements, and adding a site distance easement and note to the final plat. You're looking at the preliminary plat, by the way. Number 2 is to supply a copy of the maintenance agreement to staff for review. And I have that right now. We are reviewing that. If you have any questions, I will try to address them.
Commissioner French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious. I drive by this development about every day I come over here. What 12 lots are fronting Nails Creek Road? I just see 8 lots fronting it.
There's lots. I'll read them to you, and then I'll tell you why. Lot number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 all have road frontage.
Right.
In addition, lot 27, 21, 18, and 13. There's your 12 lots. All of those lots contain the flag all the way down to the county road, therefore they have road frontage as well.
Commissioner McClellan.
I don't know if it concerns anybody else, but it does me that all of a sudden we've got 4 private drives, in one subdivision. It just seems like we're getting in a bad pattern there. I don't know, maybe not.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, there was a time when our subdivision regulations before 2006 restricted subdivisions to either having paved private roads, paved public roads, or the use of one common driveway. Even before we changed the regulations, we saw that as development costs increased, more developers were leaning towards common driveway development, especially on smaller tracts of land because of the cost of infrastructure. In the 2006 regulations, we amended those we changed the regulations. That restriction was no longer there. There is no limitation to the number of common driveways to develop a single parcel of land. There are other ways to develop this property, but this one works as well.
Commissioner French.
Would you said lot 27, 21? But the other 4 lots?
18,
18
18 and 13 as well.
In other words, the...
In other words, the end of the
The terminus.
common driveway, it terminates there, that's what you're counting as a flag?
If you'll look at lot number 27, all of the property in that flag for Humble Way is actually part of lot 27. It's not part of lot 26, 25, or 24, it's part of lot 27. And the easement for 24, 25, and 26 is across that same flag.
Are you calling, I'm trying to look at the flag is the
like a
common
flag-
driveway?
Well, it's actually the parcel underneath the common driveway. It's a flag. Think of it like a flag and a flagpole.
Right,
The pole would be
okay.
where the common driveway sits on top of, but it's actually attached to lot 27 for Humble Way. So lot 27 has road frontage.
I see. Okay.
Commissioner McClellan?
Is there a required turnaround at the end of these cul-de-sacs?
Yes,
Or
sir.
end of these easements?
Yes, sir, it's actually contained within the easement. It'll be a Y or a T turnaround. It's typically not designed outside of that area. If it is, or if we find that because of one reason or another it has to be, the surveyor will make that portion of the easement big enough to fit that turnaround in. And that would appear on the final plat, not on this drawing.
Also, will there be 4 separate maintenance agreements for each, or you,
There's actually one overall property owners association because there's drainage facilities, and there's individual maintenance agreements for all of the lots served for each driveway. So yes and no to your question. There will be 4 maintenance agreements per driveway. You won't pay to maintain somebody else's, but everybody will pay to maintain the drainage facilities in the back of the property.
What is the overall width of that flag then?
25 feet.
25, it is just the 25 feet as shown on...
Yes, sir.
As the drive, okay.
And all 4 of them will have paved entrances. And we are also, I'll mention it, it's in the staff write-up, but the lots along the road frontage will all side enter to the common driveways as well. And we've done that time and time again for safety reasons. So you're going to have a 28-lot subdivision here, and you'll only have 4 driveways on Nails Creek. If they divided it some other way and didn't show us common driveways, they could have easily 12 new driveways. And the site distance easement that we're putting on there, that we've talked to and agreed to, they're not going to have any vegetation higher than grass, no signs, no subdivision signs, and no mailboxes along that stretch of Nails Creek as well. Because when the first mailbox goes up and blocks the site distance, pretty soon you'd have 28 along that very short stretch of road. So they've agreed to move those beyond that site distance easement for safety reasons. So I think this is a good plan. It's a straight stretch of road. To have only 4 driveways is a lot better than what they could have asked for.
Mr. French?
Oh, I'm sorry, I keep,
Oh, okay. Any other questions, comments? Do I have a motion? Pardon?
A motion to accept it with the planning recommendations.
We have a motion and a second. Any further questions, comments? All right, we have a motion to approve the preliminary plat subject to staff recommendations and requirements. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Second item I have begins on page 5. It's item E1. It's a preliminary and final plat, minor subdivision. The Harrell property off West Millers Cove Road by Mildred and Roy Harrell. There are 2 lots and a remainder greater than 5 acres. If you look at the bottom of the page, the outstanding items to be completed. Number 1, signature plats, including environmental health department approval and a $20 per lot platting fee. And number 2 is to add a note indicating driveway access restrictions for lots 1 and 2 per staff analysis. If you want to look at the plat with me really quick, tract 1 is going to have driveway access off of Wolf Creek Road only and none along West Millers Cove Road. And tract number 2 is going to have driveway access near that trailer that looks like it goes over the property line in that area, because there's a hump in the road there, so that's the best place. Now, if they want to share that driveway that crosses it, that would be up to them. But we are going to, the final plat that we actually have in our possession has already been marked up by the surveyor and agreed to. So I just wanted to let you know. That's all I have.
Commissioner McClellan?
So the driveway is gonna be abandoned for track 3 also? Are they gonna build their own driveway?
Well, they have the option to use the existing one, but there's no reason to limit that flag from another driveway. Doesn't appear to be a sight distance problem there.
Well, if they're gonna use that, they need to create an easement across that track 1 and 2 for that.
That's correct. But it has road frontage, so I'm looking at the
I know it's
lots.
got road frontage, but it needs to create an easement if there's gonna be a permanent easement across there.
They could do that by way of deed. All the lots meet our restrictions.
But it ought to be on the plats, isn't it?
I don't think it's germane to the plat.
I do, but, okay.
Commissioner Harrison?
No, I didn't push it. I think he pushed his.
My understanding, when I spoke to the surveyor originally, was that they were going to get rid of the driveway, or at least from the common use of it. So we looked at it from a standpoint, excuse me, of 3 lots with road frontage.
So potentially they would, track 3 would either use Wolf Creek Road or the flag stem going down to West Millers Cove?
Yes. If they choose to use the driveway, by agreement or easement on the deed that they transfer, that's fine. They could technically, Bruce is correct, they can show it on here, but they don't have to.
Just keep in mind, all the planning commission needs to do is to ensure that each lot has adequate access, and each lot has adequate access. Given that there was some question as to whether they were going to abandon that drive or not, that can be resolved later on, and it can be done by deed or miscellaneous record agreement. But each one of those lots actually has proper access.
Just out of curiosity, does the flag serve a purpose from a geographical standpoint? If we got the access from Wolf Creek, what would be is there an underlying need for that flag?
Topography on Wolf Creek is like this, and it rolls, there's already a driveway right next to it, and it's steep, but it's a lot easier to construct a driveway off of West Millers Cove than Wolf Creek.
Commissioner French?
I guess my question is, if we approve this, I'm kind of inclined to agree with Commissioner McClellan. If we agree to approve this, and there's a squabble over this driveway, that whether it's going to be used or not, is it going to come back on us as far as having approved this, and then with nothing being said about this driveway?
Again, I think Doug had mentioned that there was a discussion about abandoning the driveway, and keep in mind it is the function of the Planning Commission to ensure that there's adequate access to each lot. If there is a, quote, squabble about the driveway, each lot can then access itself off of a road. So we've ensured that. I think there's enough question there that requiring an easement kind of puts the onus on that driveway, even though they're talking about abandoning it. It'll have it on record. And I think if they're not going to abandon it, if they're going to use it by common consent, they can actually establish that easement by deed or by miscellaneous record. but it is not required to actually approve the lots at this time.
And I guess I want to go back to Commissioner Hodges' question. The purpose of the flag was to give Lot 3 access to both roads, or? I mean, it had access to Wolf Creek Road.
My understanding that the house that you see on track 3, I believe the 2 mobile homes in the front are not being used at all, and someone actually lives in the house. I was told, and I'm just going to repeat what I was told, that they wanted to, at some point in the future, abandon the driveway and bring their driveway from the house straight down to West Millers Cove Road within that flag.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve with the staff recommendation.
Tom, second. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the preliminary plat, subject to staff recommendations. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. 1 nay. Motion carries.
You ready?
Doug?
Miscellaneous item, top of page 6. Number 1, it's a right-of-way acquisition for Burnett Station Road section for the Kenny Guffey property. This is an abandonment of road right-of-way for Burnett Station. I've given you the drawing for the Kenny Guffey plat, and Marlene spent quite a bit of time on the color photograph that's attached, and I think that's useful to look at as well. If you look at the plat first, you'll see the hatch section. That's the proposed right-of-way to be given to the Kenny Guffey property. If you look at the photograph, you see it has a paved section that's still on the ground, but it's been blocked off at the Chapman Highway end, and it has not been used for years. In the late 90s, the state of Tennessee signalized this intersection, and I think it had a flashing light prior to that, but they put in a really big apparatus, and the county was involved in the project by realigning the end of Chapman Highway the end of Burnett Station at Chapman Highway to match up with Old Sevierville Pike across the road, if you can see that. Part of it's on the picture. At that time, the county agreed, and there was a different owner. It wasn't Mr. Guffey at the time, but they agreed to give that section of property to that Guffey property. And I confirmed that with Tony Abbott, and again with the highway superintendent, Mr. Dunlap, and also with Jeff Hatcher. Mr. Dunlap has no problems with this abandonment at this time. At this point, we basically need a recommendation from the Planning Commission for the abandonment. It would then go to a recommendation to the County Commission for the abandonment. It would go to the County Commission for action and any hearings they may have. And then once that was approved by the County Commission, the Secretary of the Planning Commission could sign the plat. If you have any questions, I'll try to address them, or John might have some answers for you.
Any questions or comments?
Just curious, that is county right away, not state right away?
Yes.
Will this be, quote, given to that property owner or sold?
I understand given.
Just help me familiarize the process, I should say. If he was a property owner that was compensated for the property, with the right-of-way acquisition to begin with, would there not, is that the way it works out? You give it back to him, I should say, or why wouldn't it be sold to the highest bidder, or whatnot? What is the disposal process that is there?
I think there's probably a lot of different disposal processes. I don't want to get into them all, but this is essentially a remnant tract that was promised to the previous owner when that intersection was realigned, probably in an agreement with him to make a better alignment. You couldn't sell it as a lot. It's not a standalone lot. typically in situations, and I just know this from my own experience, that when there are remnant tracks like that, you know, it's liability for the county if someone else drove up that little section and it being a county property still. So, you know, who else would you give it to except the property next door?
I acknowledge that, I just didn't understand if you're familiar with the disposal process, that the way they normally do it, they just give it to the neighboring property owner or owners, is that?
It does occur that way sometimes.
Mostly if you abandon a property, it's abandoned and quit-claimed. At least that's the way it's been done in the past. Quit-claim to the adjoining property owners. Now, the only adjoining property owner here is one.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner McClellan?
If this building is taken down, he can't add on to that building in front of that building setback line, can he?
Well, the whole building, if you see, is essentially in front of the setback line.
But right, the existing one, but he can't add on to that building on the sides because of the setback.
I'll let John answer that.
Pre-existing.
I'm going to give you my opinion on that. If it's a business, and I think it is a business
It's
building.
vacant.
It's vacant, but it's a commercial building. It depends on how long it's been abandoned. There might be some non-conforming provisions that allow it to expand within appropriate setbacks. Now, you're probably right. They couldn't add building on the front building setback line, but they could in the rear.
Or they could go to BZA.
Could go to BZA.
I just want to be clear, I do believe that the intent, once they add this tract to it, or this remnant to it, is to go to the BZA and possibly remove this structure and try to build back in that setback something new. But I haven't seen that plan.
Okay. I would suggest, if that's the case, I wasn't aware of that, before they bring the final plat in and have the setbacks defined on plat, that they get the BZA to grant the variance so we can have a proper setback shown there, just for their information. Is anybody here representing this one? Okay, do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, before you start putting the final plat to this for signature, it'd be best to get that BZA variance if you're going to get it. That way we won't have to show the setback like that.
I make a recommendation for approval to pass it along to the county commission.
Okay.
It's a recommendation for approval.
It would be a recommendation to approve the abandonment. We have a motion and a second to send a recommendation on to the county commission in support of the abandonment. If there's no further questions, comments, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank you,
Doug.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
John? Okay, I do have two items on the long range, and I'll have a little bit for staff report, but it's going to be very brief. But we'll open it up for further discussion on rural arterial two-lane roads and commercial use. At the last meeting, you asked me to come back with examples of rural and neighborhood commercial zoning that would relate to two-lane roads. Provided you with several examples, and I can go through those and point out some salient points, or we can just open it up for discussion. I'll leave it up to you as to how you want to proceed.
That's my back, sir.
Okay.
John, why don't you walk through what you see as salient points in what you found in other districts?
Okay. Well, in Sevier County, which is a neighboring county, they have a definition of rural business, which is kind of restricted, and I don't think it relates so much to their rural commercial district. I just want to note that that is similar to the what Blount County calls family commercial enterprise. So I don't think that definition really is what we're talking about here. We allow family home enterprises or family enterprises through special exception, and it's not related to status of road. It's related to a home site. Okay. The rural commercial district in Sevier County is, and if you'll see the gray highlight, I've got it in yellow on mine, but the gray highlight shows that it is oriented towards collector streets or main intersections. Collector streets are 2-lane roads. Very rarely do you find 4-lane roads, so I'd presume that this then relates to 2-lane roads. Collector streets could be as major as what Sevierville Road would be, although Sevierville Road is an arterial. If you look at the uses permitted, I want you to note that hardware stores, convenience stores, etc., are permitted there. If you look through that list, the one that stands out to me is the hardware stores. I've checked some hardware stores, and Mr. French can maybe tell us how many square feet his store used to have. But the hardware stores, to get any economies of scale, are getting bigger and bigger. I think even the small stores like a True Value are probably getting up close to 10,000 square feet. And I just want to point that out, and you're going to find this when you get further into some of the other examples. Just as a contrast, in Sevier County, their general commercial district is oriented to high traffic areas, which would probably be their arterials, and they allow a much wider range of uses. But I just provided that for some comparison. In Loudoun County, if you'll turn to page 3, well, let's turn to page 3. Before we go too far down, notice that on item 8, the top of page 3, the individual retail stores, etc., are not to exceed 5,000 square feet. That gives you an indication that they're talking about kind of the same restriction that we have of 4,000 square feet in the general area. But they also have uses permitted as special exception. Now, the 5,000 square feet is a use permitted, okay, and it's restricted to 5,000 square feet. You could put into a use permitted by special exception in a separate zone something that's over 5,000 square feet. In other words, up to 10,000 square feet. So there's ways to accommodate this in different ways. We could put something like a 10,000 square foot use as a special exception and just have it as a permit, a general permit up to 4,000, 5,000 square feet. And I'm not stuck on the 10,000 square feet for that either. Just want to bring that up. If you'll turn to the next page, 4, what I want to highlight for Anderson County is that it is designed for general thoroughfare, not designed for general thoroughfares, which means I think they're talking about a not for arterial. They're looking at minor collector streets, which are 2-lane, almost by definition. You very rarely see a minor collector that's got 4 lanes on it or 3 lanes. So Anderson County is looking at 2-lane roads. And they allow, on the next page, if you look at at the top of the page, that list of uses, they allow drugstores. Now, drugstores, they don't have a square footage minimum or maximum in Anderson County. But a drugstore, I've looked at what CVS and Walgreens, their square footage along Foothills Mall Drive, and CVS is 9,645 square feet. Walgreens is 14,595 square feet. So if you have those types of drugstores, building that size, you're talking about an economy of scale. You're not going to get, possibly you can get a small 4,000 square foot drugstore to go in. It might be a family-run operation, but those are very few and far between. Very few of them get established, and probably not too many of them are going to get established out in a rural area. You also have healthcare and rehabilitation facilities, and some of those can be fairly large. They do accept hospitals, which are very, very big, and medical incinerators, which we had a problem with about 20 years ago here. So their uses seem to show me that they're not talking about a very, very restricted floor area. If you turn to the next page, on page 6, This is for the general commercial district. They are then, at the top of the page, related to principal thoroughfares. In Wilson County, on page 7, if you look at their list of uses, they list restaurants, and that kind of stood out to me. Again, along the Foothills Mall area, Nader's Restaurant is an 8,500 square foot restaurant. If you're talking about a McDonald's or a Burger King or something like that, you can get those less than 4,000 square feet. So, keep in mind that if you think about restaurants as a use, you can probably accommodate them as in a smaller floor area, but some of the restaurants actually for seating purposes get fairly large. If you have any questions along the way, please chime in.
John, I noticed that on a couple of them, they actually will list road classifications.
Yes.
Is that better or worse or smarter to do that? Or no?
Well, it depends on your approach. What you're trying to do is to keep we have a gradation of uses that's been kind of truncated at the two-lane arterial level. The idea in our land use plan and in zoning was to allow home occupations everywhere, to allow family enterprises in outbuildings that can be up to 2,000 square feet depending on the size of the lot. 1,000 square feet is a minimum. I mean, it's the standard, and I think if you have 2 acres, you can get 2,000 square feet. Beyond that, it gets into the general commercial uses. And we did allow by special exception in the R1 zone on collector and arterial roads certain commercial uses that reference back to our general commercial zone. We allowed them with a maximum floor area of 4,000 square feet. And we did then have a commercial zone that was in the urban growth boundary to begin with, and that was basically the transportation and commercial zone in Maryville. We used that as a template. After reconsideration, we looked at 411 South and other parts of the county and produced a rural arterial commercial zone. But we only addressed the 4-lane cross-section in that change. At the same time, we took out all these special exceptions for the R1 zone for general commercial uses. So we're talking about trying to put something back in that was there before, but doing it in a little bit more sensitive manner. Looking at the arterial roads, which seems to be more conducive to traffic and to commercial uses, and keeping it off the collector status roads, which are more serving rural residential areas.
And if you spell that out, that road classification, then you're consistent with everything else we've done so far, correct?
I'm sorry,
If you spell out.
can you press your...
If you spell out that road classification, that would be consistent with everything that we've already done so far that you're speaking of.
Yes, except that we will limit it to arterial roads and not to collector anymore.
Correct.
If we use special exception. Now, we're talking about doing possibly doing what as one alternative, a separate zone and not just special exception. So we have not come to any determination on this in the Planning Commission, and I've not come to any determination in this in recommendation. I've just given some alternatives. But those are the two that we're looking at, where we're talking about limiting it to the arterial roads, which are meant to be more traveled and heavier used. Okay. I provided you also with some examples from municipalities. City of Maryville has a neighborhood district, doesn't give you too much information on that. Alcoa provides for a neighborhood commercial district, and it gives quite a bit more information. Clinton has a neighborhood district, and I think I've got some on page 10. If you look at page 10, I want to point out the list of uses: grocery stores, hardware stores, restaurants, related to arterial and major collector streets. So they're talking about some major types of uses in their neighborhood district. Okay. Make sure I think I had highlighting one before, but I might come back to that. In Oak Ridge, they do have square footages of 6,000 square feet identified. They're talking about mainly pedestrian-oriented, proportional to the residences, and this is in a city, so keep that in mind. But it does identify some different square footages there. They're allowing drugstores up to 20,000 square feet, and I gave you some examples that went quite a bit above 4,000 square feet. Grocery stores up to 50,000 square feet, and hardware stores up to 20,000 square feet. Now, 20,000 square feet is about a fifth of a Home Depot. I think I looked at the square footage of Home Depot. It was a little bit over 100,000 square feet. So you're talking about something scaled down, but you're not talking about 4,000 square feet for a hardware store. So they do recognize in a neighborhood context a smaller type of a service store, up to 20,000 square feet for hardware, 50,000 for grocery store, which is, I don't know, could be. And then drugstores, a lot of those are, you just don't find too many small drugstores establishing anymore, okay? Mm-hmm. No. Oak Ridge has a neighborhood commercial district, and it lists all the uses on page 12, including retail food stores, drug stores, and hardware stores. So we're looking at size, and we're looking at use, we're looking at location, relationship to roads. There's a lot of variables here to look at, and these are some of the ways that some of the other other jurisdictions have looked at. On page 15, so the city of Sevierville has shopping centers. Shopping centers, which can be very big. Grocery stores, drug stores, hardware stores, and restaurants. We've been through that. Those are actually quite a bit bigger, usually, than 4,000 square feet, although you can limit them. In the town of Louisville, which comes back home again, Louisville has a general commercial zone that is, they don't have 4-lane roads in Louisville. So if you want an example of how a fairly non-dense municipality, I mean, they at one time wanted to be a rural type of municipality, how a small municipality that's allowing uses on 2-lane roads goes, you can look at Louisville, and there's a lot of commercial uses that have been allowed in Louisville without disrupting the traffic and so forth. And they do allow retail trade and services, quite a few of those. In fact, one of those is building now. The Dollar General is building at the corner of Minner and Louisville Road at the Circle. That's all I have to highlight there. What you see from that, and I'll repeat it again, you see a play of the orientation to a road, which realizes traffic, an orientation to types of uses allowed, and if you look at a little bit more deeper in that, you have some distinctions between actual zones and uses in special exception context. So there's a lot of different play in here, a lot of different variables, and I think what we need to do is to discuss those different variables and come to some conclusion. And one of those conclusions, quite frankly, it was pointed out in the public hearing, can be doing nothing, keeping it the way it is.
John, is it possible to get a map, a Blount County map of the roads that we're considering, these changes would affect?
Yes, I actually brought it to one meeting, but we never got to that. Laying it out in a meeting like this, that was one of the reasons I wanted to have a workshop type of a setting, and we just kind of didn't do my homework as well as I should, and we ended up meeting in here as a kind of a public hearing. We need to get a workshop where you can put it on a table and get around the table and look.
My next question is, if there's roads on that map that it affects that maybe doesn't qualify to, can we exclude any of those roads if we felt like that they didn't, if maybe a road, the quality of a road at this point in time didn't allow us to make a decision on other without hurting other roads over a bad road is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, yes, you could. I gave a list in that November 18th memo of the major and minor arterial roads in the county. There are 2 lane that this might apply to in the intersections, because we were talking about restricting it to intersections. That is a list from which you can pick. But you need to treat similar situations similarly, and you need to have a reason for taking something off a list if it really should be there. And, something like width of road, traffic, curvature, the geometrics, you could exclude certain situations, and you would be well within your justification for doing that. I think Mr. French has.
Commissioner French?
I'd like to expand on what Clifford just brought up. I think you hit on what I was going to suggest, is just put those intersections that would be affected, that we would probably, if we did create a zone, those intersections that you listed. And also a density map that shows the surrounding community or surrounding neighborhoods at those intersections, because we are talking about neighborhood stores. To be perfectly honest with you, to me, a McDonald's does not draw from the neighborhood. It's drawn from everybody. People going to drive up from. That's not a neighborhood store to me.
Yeah.
And restaurant, the 2 things that stood out to me when I read this were mobile home parks and restaurants. I thought, how is that a neighborhood? How is that designed for a neighborhood to attract neighborhood traffic? Because that's what we're talking about, is being convenient to the people that were in those neighborhoods, in those intersections. Making it convenient.
I don't know that we've come to a conclusion. I don't know that you have come to a conclusion that you're going to use the neighborhood as a concept necessarily. The way I approached it was that this is a rural commercial situation that provides service to traffic that travels through rural areas, and provides service to several neighborhoods. It's not just one neighborhood. So if you're talking about an intersection and the area immediately around it, you might be missing down the road, like Burnett Station Road and Hingle Estates that might be coming into Maryville. You'd have a stop-off point somewhere at Burnett Station, and I'm just using that as an example, Burnett Station and 411. If you keep it too close into the intersection, you're missing the actual service area for that use.
I've got a concern about how much real pull there is to do this. I mean, they're not beating down the doors, are they? The last time I sarcastically said it's between 5 and 500, more than 5 and less than 500, but, is there really that much pull for us to do anything at this point?
Well, you can look at it 2 ways. Are you going to wait till there is an overwhelming demand for it? A lot of times it's very difficult to address these situations rationally when the overwhelming demand is driving your consideration. So no, there's not there's not a surge and a wave of requests, but there are some requests, and they're substantial, and it's been ongoing for several years now. So no, there's not a wave. I would suggest that you look at it in a more dispassionate way and not wait till that occurs. If there is one demand for it and one request for it, is that a reasonable request? That should be the question in your mind. Should you be denying that based on the taking out of all the provisions we had before in the R1 zone for special exception? Should that stand, and should we do it incrementally, wait for a big wave to come on and do it big time, which is sometimes hard to make a decision in that type of context. So, no, there's not a big wave, but now might be the time to do it. The economy is picking up, by the way. I sent out to you the building permit trend, and the building permits are going up. We're getting quite a bit more. I think the vacancy rates in the commercial buildings are going down, and you know, there's going to be a point where we're going to have to build a little bit more. I think Mr. Hodge brought this up. We're going to have to look at growth in the future and accommodate that demand for commercial use, the cities and the county.
Do we want to schedule a workshop? And, no, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I'd think that this would be basically what it says, planning for the future, so that we have a plan for that need if it comes. And then we're not having to make rash decisions or quick decisions to try to get something accomplished. If we have a plan set up for the future, then it makes those things work smoother, correctly? Or,
Well, that's one way of approaching it. I mean, I'll tell you the truth. I've worked in several places where everybody waits till it gets to be a crisis, and making good planning decisions in a crisis or a big demand mode is sometimes problematic. I prefer and I advocate a steady and reasonable planning process all along. And, you know, I'm bringing this forward because we have had some requests, but we've had to say no. And if that's the way that the county wants it to be, Roger and I will keep saying no, because we go by what's in the regulations. But we're bringing forward to you a situation where we had it before, we took it out, there was some incremental adjustments to special exception, but not a general adjustment. We were reacting to specific requests that came in depending on power, you know, points, whether there's enough power point there to actually change it. Now's the time, I think, in the lull that we've had in this last recession, to think about the future, that we're going to be growing again, and there might be some demand for commercial uses out there in those rural areas that we had before, that we did allow before but are not allowing now.
I just sitting here thinking about this, and you know, most commercial properties in Blount County is on two-lane roads. The biggest portion of commercial properties is on two, and there's nothing wrong with that, as long as it's not a business that jeopardizes the health, safety, and welfare of the general public. Actually, like in our area up there, instead of having to drive all the way to Merle, we go down to the local store if we want something that we need. And that actually keeps traffic off the roads, is one way of looking at it. I just wonder if it's possible, John, if you could come up with a model for us to look at and take into example these that you've included in here, and something that we can take a look at and modify and improve or disapprove, or something we can put our hands on and customize to what Blount County needs. Is that possible to do that?
Well, yes, I could use my own imagination, but quite frankly, I don't think that is what I'm being paid for. I'm being paid to facilitate your imagination in this. There are a lot of variables here, and I think we need to work through the variables. And you make some preferences as a body, because you're going to have to make the recommendation to the county commission eventually on this if you go that route. So I think you need to make some determinations. One, are you going to have a separate zone? Or are you going to do it by special exception in the R1 zone? I don't think we ever came to a conclusion on that. That would really determine how I would write some model ordinance language that you could then refine. But I think we need to make some basic decisions on Are we going to limit it to intersections? Going to be a stretch of road, certain types of road? Is it going to be by special exception or a zone? Or is it, and is it going to be, what types of uses would you want in that zone or as those special exceptions? Once you can give me a body of information like that, I can write you an ordinance. But I think it'd be a little premature for me to write you a structure of an ordinance and presume to take your function.
Well, we're looking at so many different variables here of situations, and is kind of what I was getting around to. And for instance, if you just limit it to intersections, normally intersections are if you just limit to intersections period, that's normally where all your accidents occur, is at intersections. So it can be good or bad. So what I'm saying here is if we had, like, take a model, we could take one of these here, that Sevier County or somebody like that, and, you know, and add to or take away from or change. But we've got to have a starting point, the way I see it, in order to overcome some of the things we don't want, some of the things we do want. That's what I'm getting at.
Tom?
I just want to echo a couple of comments on Clifford and Jerry. You know, the word planning to me is a proactive approach, not a reactive approach. And I think it's our appointed obligation that we all have is to make sure that we try to take the proactive approach. And by doing, just like you said, Gordon, you get something going and you tweak it, and that's proactive versus trying to react to things and deal with the negative. So I certainly support what I think everybody's feeling is that planning is proactive, and it's too easy to be reactive. I don't want to keep repeating that word, but I think that I personally agree that I would rather be proactive and try to have something that you can work and tweak and make accommodating to people than have nothing and then have something happen that you wish that wasn't, you know, as open-ended.
I still think, and I mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation, that a workshop type of situation where we can have a little bit more of a facilitated discussion might be a little bit better, and have map out on the table and things like that. And we can go through each one of these different factors one at a time and then consider them all together and give me an idea of what you think is most appropriate for Blount County. That's when I can actually sit down and start writing recommended verbiage for regulations.
Clifford?
So do we need to make some kind of recommendation to do a committee or a workshop for this, or?
Well, I think that's where I was headed, Clifford. Given your comments about the roads, I would suggest, Sean, we schedule another workshop, but let's have the road plan or the roads, and let's talk through where we even begin to think it's appropriate. And you'll have a feel, you can have a feel when you go into that workshop, where we see population densities today and where we anticipate that it's going to be headed. I mean, I'm sure you have a general feel for what areas are going to be developed and not be developed. I think we all have concerns. I mean, we have in the back of our mind, Commissioner French has made it very clear. He travels Sevierville Road. We've all got concerns about Sevierville Road. It is clearly an arterial, but it's not the greatest arterial in the county. So I think looking at maps and saying, where do we want to allow something to happen, and what are the legitimate reasons for not allowing something to happen, and talk through whether we even move ahead.
Could we have the workshop in a different room than this, so we could lay out maps or
Yeah,
put them on the
definitely.
wall? Or
This is not too conducive to
no,
a
it's
workshop.
not.
Yeah.
It's not. No.
So, John, you were looking at your calendar. Did you?
Well, I was thinking about the end of March, but there's actually two things coming up for training at the end of March that I want you to very seriously consider going to, so I'm not willing to go with that. We could try it early in the month, and I'd have to check to see about the county commission members, whether there's conflicts early in the month. I don't think we can set it up early in March, but we could early in April. The 27th and 31st, I want you to reserve for some training, and I'll discuss that a little bit later on. If we go into April, maybe the first week in April, if I can find some day that doesn't conflict with the county commissioners, we could set it up then. You get it further into the month, we have quite a few conflicts. There is a fifth Tuesday, April the 29th, which is usually a good indication that people haven't scheduled over it, although everybody seems to make a rush to the fifth Tuesday. Are you out of town? Okay.
Can I possibly recommend an hour prior to our normal monthly meeting as a possible workshop? I think we might have done that before, and it seemed to be.
But then we have the problem that unless we meet somewhere in a meeting room and,
It just seemed like we had good attendance. Whenever we did something beforehand, we had good attendance, and it was easy to justify.
Or we could do it after a meeting. We could, after you adjourn here, I was thinking about the, room 430. Was it 433, 430? Anyway, the one next to Damon's office down the way where we have the training. We can set those tables up, and we can sit around the table and discuss it and have the maps out and so forth. So before or after the next meeting would be fine also.
what's your preference?
After would be, Gordon and I have a standing board meeting right before this that we need to go
After,
to. So
okay.
after would be better for Gordon and I.
Is that all right with Commissioner French?
My suggestion would be have it separate from this meeting, and the reason I say that is most people, when they go to a meeting, they're ready to have the meeting and they're ready to go. And if you have it before the meeting, like an hour, you're limiting yourself to a certain amount of time, and it may take longer than an hour to discuss what we need to do. I think it's going to, personally. So you're going to limit yourself. And then if the meeting goes too long and you have it after the meeting, well, people are looking at their watch and it's getting dark and they're thinking, well, we need to get out of here, and you're not going to be devoting
John,
your
look,
full
check the
attention.
calendars and come up with something within the first 2 weeks of April, if that works.
Probably have to be the first week of April.
Well, whatever,
Because the county commission committee started a meeting quite a bit, and quite frankly, I could probably do it at the end of the second week. Third, I'm eaten up by meetings myself after the second week of April. But I'll look at those alternatives in relationship to the county commission calendar, and I'll send out basically an email poll and see who's available when.
I believe the only meeting, as far as commission meetings go, the first week of each month is a planning commission meeting. Is the only meeting that not the planning commission, the budget committee.
Yeah.
Is the only meeting that I'm aware of that is in the first week of the month.
Yeah.
And that's usually on Monday, so I think the first week after that, I think would be.
You have more and more committees after that. Okay. Well, let's shoot for the first week of April, and I'll look at the calendar, make sure something's open. I'll shoot for a Tuesday or a Thursday, and we'll see how that falls out, and I'll send you out an email on that to make sure everybody's available. Does that sound fair enough? Okay. And my goal in that workshop will be to go through all the different alternatives and different factors that we're talking about here, and then look at a map and get some idea from you as to which way you want to go in particular. And then I'll try to come back at the next regular meeting with some indicative verbiage that will then be subject to, by golly, a whole lot of refinement. I'm not looking at something coming out in April.
Rest of your staff reports?
Okay, I want to mention got to find my, two training opportunities in March. March 27th in Knoxville, East Tennessee History Museum, around lunchtime, and I'll send this out with more specific information, but put it on your calendars if you can. Around lunchtime, and they will feed you lunch. In Knoxville History Museum, Ed McMahon, it's not the Ed McMahon that used to give out $1 million, but it's another Ed McMahon. He's actually been here and talked several times in this region, one time at the airport with sponsorship of the, I think it was the Chamber of Commerce. He's going to discuss how you make better communities, basically how you can make your community better. On March 31st, which is the Monday after that, March 27th, I think, is a Thursday. March 31st is going to be a local training. Maryville, Alcoa, and Blount County planning departments are getting together with the Great Smoky Mountains Regional Greenway Council and with the TPO, Transportation Planning Organization, and we're wanting to put on a training to highlight the newest plans we have for greenways in the county. There was a plan that was just completed that's linking Alcoa Maryville down to Townsend, and with numbers involved, budget numbers, and also cost-benefit analysis. And it's a very interesting plan. It's adopted by the Parks and Rec Committee or Commission. And the Plan East Tennessee is wrapping up and is going to have, they have some indicative plans for greenways into and surrounding the smaller communities of Friendsville, Louisville, and Townsend, and we'd like to highlight those also. That'd be about an hour training, 30 minutes for each type of greenway, and that'll be on the March 31st in the evening, and we will feed you a light supper. The venue of that's going to be local. It's either going to be Maryville or Alcoa. It's going to be Maryville City Hall or Alcoa Service Center. We haven't nailed it down yet. It's going to be one of those two.
You talking about like 5:30, 6:30, or what?
It'll probably start around 6 and will last an hour. Well, actually, 6 to 6:30 will be the sandwiches or whatever they can provide, and then from 6:30 to 7:30 will be the actual. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And the 27th, you said that's the Knox History Museum.
Yeah. Isn't that a Thursday?
At lunch time?
Yes. It'll be in Knoxville. Where? At the East Tennessee History Museum in Knoxville. It's downtown. I'll send you more info. Pardon? Is that the one right next to the Holiday? No, it's downtown.
Is that the same place we went to the last training?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Can y'all send an email out of that?
I will send an email out there. I just wanted to give you a heads up on that so you'll know, and you will get training credit for both of those. That's all I have.
Anything else for the good of the order?
I have one thing that I'd just like to discuss, and we're having a lot of these new subdivisions or new developments where we're having all these highways come in, driveways and things coming in, and that's good because that gives us a way to boost the economy and get some development going. Is there anything we can do as a planning commission to maybe give, like if they use one-way roads, that they can have fewer driveways and still not hurt them in a development? To encourage them to take other routes of developing that property and give them some more economical way of doing it that's better than having so many entrances to the main road or to the road that it's on. That's just a concern. We've had, what, 3 or 4 of these now in the last 3 or 4 months?
Well, we've had 2. This is the second one, yeah.
Okay. And probably I see this as being an economical way for people to develop and get things going, and that's good. But can we be smarter about giving some kind of an easier way for them to do it with fewer driveways? That's just a concern of mine. I don't know if we even have any way of doing anything about it or not, but.
We actually have an alternative in our regulations to allow a one-way road. I'm not, for some reason, the only application I've seen for that is in the mountainous areas. Generally, it's a little bit more efficient to open it up by one entrance cul-de-sac out and have that one entrance instead of having a one-way road in the lowlands. Other than that, the common driveways is a method of not having to put in a major infrastructure of a road, which can be fairly expensive. I mean, that's why you see this alternative being chosen.
Commissioner McClellan?
Just what Clifford said, that's my main concern too. If this is gonna continue to make them, to be sure that they're getting built and we don't have 28 people that are gonna come to the county thinking the county is gonna be maintaining those gravel drives. I know they're exclusive easements, but those people may not realize that and they think the county is gonna have to help them out at some point. This concerns me.
And the problem with these particular developments with those gravel drives is your mail delivery. Most of your rural mail routes won't go down those roads. They'll be common mailboxes out there on the road, and that's going to cause a problem.
I think what Doug said was they would be turning in and all the mailboxes would be maybe just as soon as they turn in. I guess.
I'm not sure. I didn't follow that, but we've had that before where there's a turnout. They don't go all the way down the private easement. There's a turnout in a designated mailbox. It just keeps it a little further off the actual right of way, and that's what we're looking for. And it's only about a half a car length that you have to do that, because the biggest problem is when you go into the end of the driveway and there's a mailbox right there, that blocks your view. It can, particularly if there's a whole row of them. All you got to do is move them back a few feet, and you've got that vision.
I think if the developers are playing within the guidelines that we've got now.
Right.
But you're right. You know in the back of your mind that it may or may not be the ideal scenario for the future. So what I think we should do, and I've been advocating for this, is we've got to have an incentive. So if you want something done, you've got to give an incentive. And the incentive is more lots, unfortunately. But if you got something that makes sense long run, but the incentive is to the developer, is to gain a lot, obviously, for more revenue.
Encourage them
I give an example. A few years ago, we got in these acceleration lanes and deceleration lanes along Sevierville Road on these big developments coming in. That, to me, personally, solves a lot of problems. When you got big volume of traffic coming and going, they can get off and decelerate or accelerate just versus pulling up and pulling out. That's just an example, but a developer's not going to do it if it's just goodwill or good neighbor. You can forget that. So we have to make the incentive for them somehow where it's a give and take. If not, it's an expense to them, and they don't see any reason to do that.
Yeah, one thing I didn't point out in the discussion, I understand Bruce's problem and the consternation about having multiple common driveways in a development. What we were getting, and we got a couple of these, people were coming in, dividing the property up into 5-acre tracts exempt, getting lots of record, and coming in and developing each one of the 5-acre tracts as a common driveway development. So you can get around, you could even get around it when we limited it to one drive per development, because then you would have, in this other instance, we would have 4 5-acre tracts, and then they would have developed each one of them separately, so each one of them would have the same effect of 4 common driveways.
That goes back to their question, John. I mean, if they sold 5-acre tracts to 5 individuals, that they have that.
Nope, they weren't selling them, they were dividing them.
Correct, but I'm just saying, under normal, if they just sold the 5-acre tracts, then there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, the five individuals that bought it could have developed 4 different developments.
Correct.
Of 5-acre tracts with the same number of lots and the same driveways. Just keep in mind, there are ways around it the way we've got it set up. We were just recognizing that one, there was a demand to do it that way, and 2, you could get around it if you wanted to.
Thank you, gentlemen. We are adjourned.